guys, and welcome to my channel. Here on Abby the Witch, we do witchy and alternative things. If you're a returning subscriber, hi, welcome back. Thank you for your support. It means the absolute world to me. And if you're new here, hi, welcome. Nice to meet you, and thank you so much for joining us today. So here today on Abby the Witch, we are going to be doing yet another tarot talk. I've already covered the suit of Cups and the suit of Wands. I go suit by suit, and eventually I'll get to the major arcana and do that as well. I do ask that you just stay nice and not so critical in the comments. This is just my experience and my interpretation and my research that I've been doing. This is just how I understand the cards, through my research and through my experience, right? So just stay nice. It's totally fine if you have a different opinion. In fact, I would love to hear your opinion if it's different from mine, or your interpretation if it's different from mine, but I do ask for you to just stay respectful. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and dive into the suit of Swords. Okay, guys, so jumping right in here, I got all my suit of Swords laid out. I can only do a few at a time because my camera can't fit the whole thing. But yeah, I just scoot it down as I go. So suit of Swords in general is associated with the element of air, right? Which air is associated with intellect, logic, reasoning, intelligence, thinking, right? Specifically, the suit of Swords is really associated with kind of like the pursuit of intellect or the pursuit of intelligence, but also what happens when you use it for bad and what can happen when you use it for good, right? It also has to do with turmoil, hard times, heartbreak, but moving on from those hard times and learning from them, right? Gaining knowledge from them, gaining intellect from them, okay? So jumping right in, we go into the Ace of Swords, which is this right here. Now every ace in every ace in every suit always has this hand, at least in my traditional tarot, always has this hand coming out of a cloud holding the symbol of the suit, which in this case obviously is the sword, right? Now, whenever I think of like the ace of any suit, I really think of that hand as handing you basically the theme of that suit, right? For example, in this case, the Ace of Swords it represents a new mindset or way of thinking. It represents a breakthrough in your thinking. It represents maybe an intellectual epiphany, right? It's kind of like the hand is like handing this idea to you, like, right? It's kind of like the hand is like, hey, take this idea and do something with it, right? The Ace of Swords is encouraging kind of like starting something new. You have this new intellect, you have this new wisdom on something. It really encourages starting something new with that fresh new perspective you have, like, right, that fresh new way of thinking, right? It encourages starting something new. But if you go on to the Two of Swords, moving right along, we have a woman crossing over two swords. So to me, the Two of Swords represents a conflict with no resolution, right? I'm sorry, there's a bunch of construction going on outside also, so if you hear that, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. Conflict with no resolution, right? It's decision-making time. I almost see like the two swords that she's holding as like two choices, and she needs to decipher and choose and make a choice, right? She's blindfolded. She clearly hasn't chosen yet. But it's definitely a conflict with no resolution. It could also be like, it could also come up to represent maybe there's an issue that you've been avoiding trying to think about, right? There's something that you've been pushing under the rug, that you've been sweeping under the rug that you don't want to deal with. You need to think about it and come up with some kind of resolution, right? But there hasn't been any yet. And I almost think of the blindfold as like something she put on herself, right? Kind of like an ignorance is bliss type of thing. What you can't see won't hurt you type of thing. What you don't know won't hurt you type of thing. So yeah, that's what I see is a conflict with no resolution when I think of the Two of Swords. Moving right along to the Three of Swords. Three of Swords is representative of heartbreak. I mean, it's pretty evident in the picture. There's three swords stabbing through a heart. Definitely represents a time of heartbreak. Definitely represents a time of turmoil. But it also comes up to really remind people that this is not permanent, right? If you're in a time of darkness, if you're in a time of trauma or whatever, of heartbreak, that it is not forever and it doesn't last forever. It really encourages you to remember that, and it really encourages you to, it's not permanent, right? That's what it's trying to tell you, okay? Now, when we go to the Four of Swords, it really has to do with the Three of Swords, because the Four of Swords has to do with rest. It has to do with recuperating. It has to do with self-reflection after going through the heartbreak of the Three of Swords, right? So as you can see in this picture, there's a person laying on his back. He's contemplating, he's self-reflecting, he's being using introspection, and he's resting and thinking about his heartbreak that he just went through, right? It can also really come up to encourage solitary rest and encourage that introspection or general reflection, right? So if you're someone who just went through a massive heartbreak or something very traumatic or something very heavy and sad, the Four of Swords could really be coming up to encourage that person to recuperate after going through that, to really think about it and reflect on it, right? In solitude, really, is what this card is talking about. Is like, you really need to be in solitude and think for a while. Like I said, Suit of Swords is all about thinking, using intellect, right? Because like, even though the heartbreak one, Three of Swords, is all about heartbreak, it still is telling you to use your brain and remember that it will not last forever. Use your logic that you have, right? And remember that this is not forever, okay? Okay, Five of Swords. Five of Swords is interesting. Five of Swords, let me change my notes over here. Five of Swords represents conflict between people. It's definitely representative of a current fight that you might be having with someone or whoever you're doing the reading over. It can also represent definitely a fallout, a recent fallout with a friend or relative, whoever, a peer. So you can see in the picture, there's a bunch of swords on the ground. He's hoarding some swords. There's people walking away. It's almost like people walking away from the battle, and this person's watching them walk away, right? Now, this could have been, again, with it being the Suit of Swords and having to do with intellect, probably had to do with an argument over ideas. But definitely representative of a fallout you had with someone, an argument you had with someone, an end of a friendship, an end of a relationship. But yeah, definitely the end of some kind of relationship. Moving on to the Six. Now this has to do with a very hard transition that someone might be going through, right? If you look at the picture, it's people in a boat. People in a boat going across the river, across a lake, someone pushing them through, okay, or paddling the boat or whatever. So this is really symbolic or represents a tough transition time, okay? It really encourages letting go and moving on, okay? So I really think of this picture especially as someone who's turning their back. Her back is to you. His back is to you too, right? I really picture this as turning your back on something and just moving on. Like, don't dabble in and dwell on past heartbreak that you've had. Don't dwell on those emotions so much. Use your intellect and reasoning to really just move on. Okay, it's a tough transition. It's hard. She doesn't look very happy about it. It doesn't look like it's going very easily. right? But she's doing it. And they know that they have to do it if you want to be successful and happier, really. You know, that's what that's really coming up for, is it's like, okay, you need to get your shit together. Stop dwelling on the past. Stop dwelling on past trauma. Stop dwelling on emotions that you have, right? And use your logic and reasoning and intellect to realize that you need to move on, to like bring you back to your senses. And you need to move on and make your transition to be more successful and happy. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and push down the next row and we'll move on to the next part. All right, guys, moving right along to the 7. 7 of Swords is probably one of my least favorite cards, just because it pisses me off, to be honest. But as you can see in the picture, he's looking back, he's taken someone's swords and he's running away. Okay? The 7 of Swords really represents betrayal, thievery. I think of like theft. I think of people taking advantage of someone else and stealing something from them. It's a sign, it usually gets brought up that it's a sign that someone is tricking you, or could be. It's a warning. It also could be a warning to the person that you're doing a reading on to not be sneaky. Maybe they're being the snake and trying to manipulate someone so they can take something. Again, Suit of Swords, I kind of think of like stealing someone's ideas on someone, or copying someone, or what have you. But it's definitely betrayal. Tricking someone into thinking you can trust them when really, right, they're a snake. They're a little snake. Again, they might be not necessarily actually stealing something. It could just have to do with manipulation, tricking you, maybe stealing your trust, right? Stealing your trust, stealing your faith in them, and manipulating them, tricking them so they can have their way. That's what I think of when I think of the 7 of Swords, for sure. I mean, you can see it right in the picture. He's taking swords without someone's permission and he's running off with them. Okay? So definitely comes up as a warning. It could also be that, depending on what the other cards are, the spread or the person or whatever, it could also be that that person already knows that they had been tricked and it already happened, right? 7 of Swords, though, not my favorite. Little sneaky little bastard in there stealing those swords. Moving right along, though, to the 8 of Swords. 8 of Swords is, I mean, again, it says it right in the picture. Very trapped or restricted. Okay? Now, I really think of this as having a particular mindset that is kind of restricting you. It's limiting you. Okay? So it could be coming up to really encourage you to open your mind. Okay? Try new things. Don't limit yourself so much just because of like pre-assumptions you have on something, right? It's definitely an entrapment of yourself by your own mindset. Does that make sense? Like, it could definitely be getting brought up to encourage you to not have such harsh opinions on something before you learn about them. So it definitely could be getting brought up to encourage you to kind of like research, learn, use your intellect, and learn about something before you just cut yourself off from it, right? So it's really saying having a closed mindset can trap you and restrict you, and encourages having an open mind so you can learn more, right? All right, moving on to the 9 of Swords. 9 of Swords really has to do with anxiety, fear, right? It has to do with what I think of anyway is like fear or anxiety from past experiences, not being willing to try new things or do new things, or maybe having these fears or anxieties because of past experiences that you've had, right? And I even see this picture And I'm so bad at picking these up. I even see this picture and see this person like sitting up in bed. So I think of like anxiety that keeps you up at night. Fear that keeps you up at night. Okay? It really encourages asking for help too. Like if you are struggling with trying to get over these anxieties or fears by yourself, it really encourages seeking out help. Don't be all by yourself in bed staying up at night. It really encourages talking to someone, asking someone for help. All right, moving right along. Ten of Swords. Ten of Swords has to do with major devastation, major betrayal, major heartbreak. Like something devastating has happened. You can see the person has been stabbed in the back 10 times with a sword. Not cool. It also really encourages, though, to not play the victim. It really encourages not dwelling on the past, not dwelling on past turmoil, not dwelling on past emotions or feelings. Again, using your intellect, using logic and reasoning to try and move on and not dwell on your emotions so much. Okay, it's really encouraging you to not dwell on emotion so much and stop playing the victim card. Stop using your trauma as an excuse for your behavior or as an excuse for whatever, being sad or whatever, right? We all have trauma. We all have shit that we've gone through. We all have terrible experiences that we've gone through. But it's really encouraging you to not dwell on that, not milk it. We all know that one person, right? Whenever I hear someone playing the victim, I always like think of the Ten of Swords, like immediately. But yeah, encourages moving on. A lot of the Suit of Swords, I'm sure you've noticed through this video, has to do with moving on. Using intellect and learning from something and moving on. It has a lot to do with that. So let's go ahead and move on to these two guys. We got the Page of Swords. So the Page, I feel like in every suit, the Page is similar. Like, I think of the Page of any suit as like potential, right? And in any suit, really, the Page and the Ace are kind of similar. Because it's kind of like, again, it's potential. The hand in any ace in any suit is holding like potential for whatever the theme of that suit is, right? The Page also has potential for whatever the theme of that suit is, but it's just not fully experienced yet. I think of the Page as very novice, has a lot of potential, has a knack for something, but maybe just doesn't have a lot of experience. So with the Page of Swords, full of potential and ideas, very smart, very eager to express these very smart ideas, right? When I think of the Page of Swords, I think of someone very young. I think of someone very young and ambitious. I think of someone who's young and hasn't yet learned the hard way, the difference between confidence and maybe cockiness, dare I say. But yeah, I mean, you can see like the wind is wildly blowing, right? In the picture, he's swinging the sword around. He has it up in the air and he's swinging it around. He has potential, but it's not really managed, right? We have a dude swinging a sword around, wind wildly blowing through his hair, okay? So when I think of the Page of Swords, honestly, I think of someone who is full of potential and new ideas, very eager and very eager to express those new ideas, right? However, it's a Page, right? So they're not super experienced yet. Not super experienced yet, but they have all these great ideas. So I see the wind wildly blowing. He's like wildly swinging his sword up in the air. He has all these crazy cool ideas and he's very intellectual and very smart, right? But it's kind of all just like wildly blowing all over the place and he's not really sure where to start or how to express his ideas. And a big thing with the Page of Swords is communication, right? Again, great ideas, great potential, but just doesn't know how to communicate them. So it really comes up to suggest working on your communication. I think of, with any page, honestly, in any suit, I think of someone very young who has great potential, but they're just inexperienced, right? They don't have the greatest social skills yet, maybe, or with whatever they're interested in, they're just not super experienced with it yet. So it really just comes up to encourage working on your communication. How are you communicating your new ideas? How are you talking about your thoughts with other people? How are you expressing your intellect with other people? Right? So definitely, again, has great ideas and is very smart, but just how to express them, how to show other people. He's very eager to tell other people and express it to other people, but he needs to learn how. Okay? So moving right along to the Knight of Swords. The Knight, basically in any suit, honestly, I think of the Knight kind of guarding something. In this case, he's, yes, guarding the sword, but he's also kind of like the Page, swinging it wildly around. And there's also a lot of wind. I think of the Knight of Swords as very ambitious, extremely ambitious, very impulsive with their ideas. They have no planning, okay? It kind of reminds me in the Page in that sense. Just, they're not really, well, the Page is, they just don't know how. The Knight knows how, or could know how to plan, how to express their ideas, or how to like implement a plan or things like that. Like they know how, they just don't. Extremely impulsive, extremely hasty. Usually the Knight in any suit is like that. Like the Knight of Cups is the opposite. It's like zero logic to all emotion. He's a romantic, extremely impulsive when it comes to his emotions. The Knight of Swords is extremely impulsive when it comes to his ideas. Okay? Which makes sense because, again, swords, air, intellect. He has zero planning though, okay? So I kind of think of it as someone who is extremely ambitious and has these great ideas, but he's so bad at being organized. They're so bad at implementing a plan. They're so bad at thinking ahead of time. They just do it. And half the time it kind of falls apart because, again, it was a great idea and it was super smart, but it just was not implemented well at all because they didn't plan. And that's what I think of when I think of the Knight of Swords. I mean, if you even look at the picture, it's extremely windy. Again, he's wielding his sword around, but he's running against the wind. Okay, he's running against the wind. If his plan was implemented and he had a good, sensible plan with backup plans, he would probably be running with the wind. Okay? But to me, it's like he's running against it. So he's kind of like fighting himself, right? Like he's trying to get this new idea to work so well. Like he wants it so badly to work out. And it is a good idea, but he just doesn't have a plan. So it's kind of like he's hurting himself, right? All right, let's go ahead and move on to the last two, the Queen and the King. All right, guys. So we have the very last two. Now, I always say this with any suit that I'm talking about, but the Queen and the King, no matter what you picture as the gender, like they're equal. The Queen and the King are the ultimate example of, the Queen and the King really represent the end of that journey of that suit, right? They are the ultimate example of that theme of that suit, okay? So in this case, the Queen and the King, in some shape or form, there are differences between them, of course, but they are the ultimate example of intellect and logic and reasoning, okay? So the Queen of Swords, for example, is extremely unbiased and impartial, okay? She is able to she has a lot more intellect than emotion. Okay. She is able to emotionally understand things. She's going to tell you the facts, right? She's going to use her intellect. She's going to use her logic to tell you the facts. Again, she can emotionally understand and use love to kind of cradle those facts. But she definitely is more intellectual than emotional, right? And I even look in the picture, she's holding the sword, which is extremely erect. I mean, I'm not really going to go around it. I kind of think of the sword as very phallic. It's phallic. It's associated with masculinity, which a masculinity tends to be associated with logic and reasoning. So she's holding the very erect sword, but she's also offering up her hand, her cupped hand, which is very feminine, emotional, and loving. Okay, so it's kind of like a balance between both. Again, she's the Queen of Swords, so she's definitely more intellectual than she is emotional. But she offers both. She does offer both. And she's very unbiased. Again, she doesn't let her heart get the best of her. She's extremely unbiased and tells it how it is. Okay, now looking at the king is even more extreme when it comes to intellect than the queen is. The king is definitely more logic. He is stern. He does not use emotion. He's been through a lot. He's extremely experienced and wise, right? And he's learned that he can't really let his emotion get the best of him. And because of that, he has learned how to be a very powerful, stern, logical, black and white leader. Okay? I personally like, if you watch my Suit of Cups, I personally like the King of Cups a little bit better than the King of Swords. The King of Cups is like a perfect balance between emotion and logic. And I think that's great. Kind of like the Queen of Swords, but the King of Swords it is all about intellect, logic, very experienced and wise, and he's stern. Like, it is what it is. It probably gets brought up to let you know that, especially if it's upside down. I think of the King of Swords as like, you need to start using your brain more. You know, like, don't listen to your heart as much. Look at things with facts and reason. That's how I interpret the King of Swords for sure. Okay. All right, guys. Well, that was the Suit of Swords. All right, guys. So that was the Suit of Swords. I really hope you appreciated it. The next suit is going to be the Suit of Pentacles. Then I will start diving into the major arcana. I'm really excited to do that. And again, if you guys have any other interpretations or any other opinions on any of these cards in this suit, please let me know. I do, again, ask that you just stay respectful and kind. If you're an asshole, I will block you. There's no other way around it. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys watching. Like I said earlier, I think I said it earlier, maybe not, but I do have an Instagram, Abby the Witch, just like it is here. I do actual tarot card readings on my IGTV over there, just pick a deck situations. And I'm also starting to 3D print little witchy trinkets and jewelry if you're interested in buying one of those. And that's about it, guys. So until next time, I hope you stay well. Thank you so much. Bye. I tried to make a heart and it didn't really work out.